She served stew with one good hand. The other stayed wrapped from a break she wouldn't name. Her father drank, raged, burned her mother's recipe book. Most folks looked away, but a quiet cowboy didn't. He paid for lunch, left coffee, and watched the man brag loud and hit quiet. He didn't raise a gun, he raised a ledger. By week's end, he'll own the debt, the land, and the choice to set her free, but not for himself. Would you spend your savings to protect a stranger? This is the story of how mercy took root, not with fists, but with bread, law, and neighbors who finally stood still. Stay with this one, friend. Sometimes justice rides in on a clean page, not a fast horse. The sun broke over Sagebrush Fork like a reluctant promise, casting long shadows across the cracked porch of the Collins house. A single line of smoke curled from the chimney. Inside, May Collins stood at the counter, with her sleeve rolled up and her bandaged wrist tucked tight against her side. She kneaded dough with her good hand, slow and steady, like it was the one thing left she could control. Behind the closed door, her father snored, deep, foul, and uneven. The bottle had been half full last night. It'd be empty now. The stove hissed low. It didn't ask questions. Around 9, a trail of dust stirred up the road. Rowan Hale and 2 Silver Spur cowhands rode in from the east fence line. They were quiet men, lean from work and polite from habit. Rowan, the eldest by a year or two, dismounted without a word, tipped his hat, and sat on the edge of the porch with his back straight and his boots muddy. May set out a pot of beans, 3 biscuits, and a half loaf she'd baked before dawn. Her eyes flicked to the window, still no movement from the back room. "Thank you," Rowan said softly as she poured coffee into tin cups. His voice carried the weight of someone who didn't speak unless it mattered. May nodded once, brushing flour from her apron. She winced as her wrapped wrist bumped the stove handle. Rowan noticed. "That fresh?" he asked, nodding toward the bandage. "Bread?" she deflected, lifting the dough to let it rest. "The break." May glanced at the porch boards. "Week and a half." Rowan didn't press. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small cloth sack. "Coffee, from town," he said, setting it beside the stove. "Figure you're running low." She didn't thank him, not out of rudeness, just habit. People like her didn't ask for things, and they surely didn't get gifts. Rowan stood slowly, nodding to the cowhands as they mounted up. As he swung into the saddle, Hank Collins shoved the door open behind them, shirt half-buttoned and red in the face. "Don't need no handouts," he barked, swaying slightly. "She gets paid just fine." "Didn't say otherwise," Rowan said evenly. "Don't be acting like this is some orphan house," Hank added, stepping onto the porch like a man looking for trouble. Rowan didn't take the bait. He just turned his horse and rode out slow, eyes on. The road, not the man. That night, the storm broke, not outside, but inside the house. Jars shattered, chairs scraped, and before long, May stood staring at the hearth as torn pages floated up in the flame. Her mother's recipe book, gone. The same one that smelled like cinnamon and old ink, the one with notes in the margins and jam stains from summers past. Ash fell like snow, and something inside her cooled instead of cracked. She didn't cry. She packed flour tight into a new sack and wrote down what she could remember on scraps of butcher paper. Her left hand trembled. Her jaw did not. 3 miles away, Rowan lit his lamp, sat at a pine desk, and opened a leather ledger. He wrote 3 names: Collins, Hank, Finch Mercantile, Keene and Company. Then beside them, talks loud, spends loud, pays late. He underlined late twice. The stove in his cabin ticked with heat. Outside, coyotes cried and fell quiet. Back at the Collins place, May spooned out soup for herself and wrapped her wrist again. Tighter this time. The bread would rise by morning. So would she. A leather ledger closed with a quiet click. 2 days after Rowan left that sack of coffee, Sagebrush Fork was already buzzing. Hank Collins had a way of filling silence, and by midweek his voice was spilling across the boardwalks of town like sour beer. At Finch's store, he slammed coins down for whiskey and feed, sneering that white-knight cowboys were poking where they didn't belong. At the saloon, he bragged about his kitchen and how a man could keep order any way he liked. Deputy Cole heard it all from the back corner and kept his face blank, but he didn't miss a word. Rowan kept his distance in public, but he was rarely idle. He made a quiet circuit of town, speaking softly with people who didn't want their names in stories. Widow Alma Talbot, who managed the church safe, confirmed Hank's long overdue donation notes. Old Tom, the liveryman, remembered the first mortgage Ruth Collins had taken years before, back when the house was new and hope was fresh. At Keene and Company Bank, Rowan learned that Hank's master note was still outstanding and that several smaller debts, store, feed, livery, were assignable. Rowan never spoke May's name. He only asked about paper, signatures, and dates. Each fact went into his ledger in neat lines. Beside some he drew small ticks, a code only he understood. Back at the Collins kitchen, May worked the stove and the small garden strip by the fence. Her wrists stayed wrapped but steadier now. She'd begun rewriting her mother's lost recipes at night. The smell of burned paper still in her mind, but her pencil moving firm. When Rowan stopped by for noon beans, he noticed the scraps pinned above the counter like a slow rebuilding of something sacred. "You're writing them down," he said quietly. "They're not gone if I can remember them," she replied, eyes on the dough. He nodded once, respecting the answer. That afternoon, Hank came storming back from town, slamming the door so hard the crockery jumped. "Where's the market money?" he barked. "I bought flour," May said calmly, "and sugar for the church supper." He grabbed the coin purse from her shelf anyway and left again, muttering about his house, his rules. The screen door banged, leaving her alone with the stove and a rising ache in her chest. By evening, Rowan had mapped Hank's debts on a single sheet, boxes and arrows tracing who held which claim. Widow Talbot, Old Tom, and even cautious Deputy Cole had agreed quietly to watch. Lantern by lantern, he was building a network of witnesses, not an army. Later that week, he met Sheriff Pike outside the jail. The sheriff was a tall man with a lined face, fair but careful about stepping into another man's home. "Rowan," he said, lowering his voice, "I know you're gathering things. But I can't act on rumors, no rumors," Rowan answered, handing him a copy of Hank's overdue note. "Just paper. And witnesses." Pike studied it a long moment. "If you keep it legal, I'll stand on it. But you try something else. Guns, fists, I can't help you." Rowan's gaze stayed steady. "Law's all I'm after." The sheriff nodded, almost relieved. "Then maybe there's hope for that girl yet." On the edge of town, Alma Talbot handed Rowan a sealed envelope for the church safe. "In case anything happens," she murmured. Inside was a bundle of blue ribbon Ruth Collins had left for May, and a note marked for filing if ever needed. Alma didn't ask questions. She only said, "Somebody should have helped that child sooner." Rowan touched his hat. "We're trying." As the sun dropped behind the cottonwoods, he tucked the envelope into his coat. The map of debts in his ledger now looked less like numbers and more like a noose. Each line he'd drawn had tightened, just a little. A tin star lands on a table and stays there. The Sagebrush Fork Courthouse sat squat and sun-baked, tucked behind the livery, and 2 doors down from Finch's Mercantile. Its walls held more dust than judgment, but Rowan Hale didn't need much. Just access to the register and time enough to read between the lines. He sat at the back table with his hat off, ledger open, a pencil tapping faint rhythm against the wood. The county clerk, a young man with hair like straw and the patience of a bored dog, handed him a creased book and ambled off. 3 entries down the page, Rowan found it. Patent title, Ruth Evelyn Collins, Homestead, claim number 2136, filed 1879, no transfer record, no marriage release from Ruth to Hank, no amended deed listing Hank Collins as primary holder. Rowan leaned back in the chair. "Unperfected," he muttered. That meant one thing. Hank had lived on Ruth's land, not his own. And now, with Ruth dead and no lawful heir named, the place stood in a kind of legal limbo, unless someone else filed properly. Rowan closed the book slowly. This wasn't just paper, it was rope, and if he handled it wrong, it could cinch around May as easy as Hank. Outside, the wind kicked up, tugging, at awnings and loose shutters. He made his way to Keene and Company, bank, with the slow tread of a man thinking 6 steps ahead. Inside, the banker, Mr. Ellison, adjusted his spectacles and scanned Rowan's notes. "Technically, the master note's still under Hank Collins," Ellison said, tapping the margin. "If you wish to redeem it, you'd need to clear the full balance or negotiate a release." "Which he's missed payments on," Rowan said. Ellison nodded, repeatedly. "We'd be willing to transfer the note at a discount." And the smaller debts? Rowan asked. Those are assignable. If you consolidate them, you'd hold the bulk of his obligations. Rowan rubbed the back of his neck. I don't want his land. I want her safe. Ellison raised an eyebrow. Then you'll need someone else on the paperwork. Someone who can take possession and claim occupancy without it smelling like a takeover. I've got someone, Rowan said. Back at the Collins kitchen, May was sifting flour when Alma Talbot arrived with a small cloth bundle and a quiet smile. From the church safe, she said. Your mother left it, marked for you. Inside, a blue ribbon, a crinkled envelope, and a single line in Ruth's tidy script. File if ever needed. May stared at it like it was a voice from beyond. That night, she sat at the kitchen table, copying recipes from memory. Apple bread, molasses loaf, honey biscuits, her pencil trembling but deliberate. Rowan tapped the doorframe once, gently. I need your permission, he said, to assign the debts to myself, to shield the land. She looked up, expression unreadable. Not for me, he added, for you. But if I hold them in your name, you're the one who chooses what happens next. May folded the ribbon and smoothed the envelope. You're not buying anything? No, ma'am. She glanced at her half-written recipe for sour oat bread. All right, she said quietly. Let's do it legal. Rowan gave her a small nod. Then I'll ride at sunup. By the time the rooster called, he'd packed the documents, secured a co-signature from the Silver Spurs foreman, and had a witness, Deputy Cole, lined up for the filing. The final item went into a sealed envelope marked Petition for Protective Occupancy. He handed it to Alma for safekeeping at the church. As dusk settled again over Sagebrush Fork, May placed a fresh loaf on the sill. Her wrist was healing, her eyes clear. Somewhere behind her, the ash from her mother's burned cookbook had long since settled. But now, new pages were forming. Clean, written by hand, one line at a time. A sealed envelope at the church waits for a name. The church picnic rolled out under the cottonwoods in a wash of color and sound. Gingham tablecloths rippled in the breeze. Children raced barefoot between tree trunks, and old fiddles sawed their way through Red River Valley. Sagebrush Fork had always been the kind of place that showed up for food and sunshine, even if trouble rode the edge of town. May Collins stood near the pie table, her wrist freshly unwrapped, a thin scar visible now but healing. She wore her mother's blue ribbon pinned to her collar. It wasn't for show, it was for memory. Folks eyed her gently, not sure where to land their sympathy. They knew what Hank was, they just hadn't known what to do about it, until now. Rowan Hale stood off near the church steps, hat in hand, talking low with Deputy Cole. He didn't smile, but there was something solid in the way he stood, like a man who'd stopped waiting for permission. Hank arrived late, shirt wrinkled, face flushed from a bottle he'd hidden behind the saloon. Viola trailed behind, clutching a basket like it might save her. He swaggered down the line, loud enough for everyone to hear. Guess the whole town's taken up cooking now, he barked. My kitchen's out here playing farmer's wife with a ranch hand. A hush settled over the grass. May didn't flinch. She calmly sliced a piece of lemon pie and handed it to a child, waiting with his plate outstretched. Rowan stepped closer. Afternoon, Hank, Hank sneered. You courting charity cases now, Hale? You want her so bad, why not buy the house too? Rowan turned to Deputy Cole. Mind witnessing something for the record? Cole nodded. Rowan's voice was calm but deliberate. May Collins's wrist was broken by Hank Collins. Witness the day after, signs still visible, statement made of her own accord. Cole pulled out a notebook and pen. Hank's face went dark. That's slander. No, sir, Cole said evenly. It's a statement, and I'm just here to write it down. The crowd murmured, not loud, just enough to shift its weight, draw breath, lean a little closer. From the back of the church porch, Widow Alma Talbot stepped forward with a bundle in her arms. She unwrapped a square of faded cloth, revealing a note and a folded ribbon. Ruth Collins left this in the church safe, she said, her voice cutting the silence. Said it was to be filed if ever needed. She handed it to Deputy Cole. He read it, eyebrows due. Rising slightly, then tucked it carefully into his satchel. Hank scowled. That ain't legal. Ain't worth nothing. I built that house. May looked him in the eye. You didn't build it. You stayed in it. She built it. Hank opened his mouth again, but Sheriff Pike appeared behind him, hands on his hips. "That's enough, Hank." The words landed harder than a fist. Rowan stepped back, not to retreat, but to let the silence stretch, to let it show who stood where. Later that evening, as families packed up their baskets and fiddlers packed their bows, Finch from the Mercantile walked quietly over to Rowan. "Word is, Keene might be sellin' the master note." Friday, noon. Rowan gave a single nod. "Appreciate it." Back at the Collins house, May pinned a new recipe to the wall, corn muffins with sage and honey. She read it out loud once, then folded her mother's ribbon into her apron. The sun dipped low behind the cottonwoods, casting long shadows over porch rails and fence posts. A storm was coming, but this time it had a name, a time, and a plan. Finch whispers that Keene may sell the note by Friday noon. Friday came dry and bright, with wind from the west rattling the town awnings. Rowan Hale rode into Keene and Company just before noon, his coat dusted, his ledger clean, and his jaw set firm. Mr. Ellison was waiting, crisp collar buttoned, wire-rimmed glasses gleaming in the light. He nodded once, as if the deal was already done. "We're prepared to release the master note," Ellison said, sliding a thick envelope across the desk. "Your funds, the ranch co-signature, and," he tapped a smaller folder, "the assignment of the remaining debts. Store, feed, livery. All consolidated." Rowan checked each document, signed in quiet strokes, and added the Silver Spur's notarized support. He accepted the envelope with a respectful nod. Outside, he paused beneath the awning. The town moved slow around him. A horse clopped past. A screen door banged. The note weighed like something more than paper. It was leverage, but also a promise. He didn't ride straight to Hank. First, he went to Finch and asked for every name listed under Hank's feed account. Finch handed it over without question. Then Rowan stopped by Widow Talbot's. "This is yours now," he said, handing her a duplicate ledger. "If anything happens to me, you have it all." She took it in both hands, nodding with understanding more than words. At dusk, he arrived at the Collins place. Hank was on the porch, shirt stained, boots kicked up on the rail like he owned the world. Viola sat inside, staring blankly out the kitchen window. Rowan dismounted slow and calm. "I bought your note," he said, "and the rest. The land, the debts, all of it," Hank laughed, harsh and sudden. "So, you're here to evict me?" "No," Rowan replied. "I'm here to offer you a clean exit. Sign over the homestead to May. She's Ruth's daughter. Walk away. No foreclosure, no public trouble." "You think I'd hand over my land to that ungrateful brat? It was never yours to begin with," Rowan said simply. Hank's smile died. "You just want her for yourself." Rowan didn't blink. "That's not your concern." Hank spat in the dirt. "You'll regret this." That night, retaliation came. Two drunks from the saloon, men who owed Hank for free drink and mean talk, staggered up the Collins fence line with bottles and malice. One hurled a rock through the side window. The other kicked in the garden gate and trampled the growing squash. They didn't stay long. A lantern flared from the barn, and May stood tall in its glow, shotgun pointed at the sky. She didn't fire, just racked it once, sharp and loud. They ran. By morning, the fence was broken, glass scattered, the corner post snapped like a wishbone. But the kitchen still stood, the bread still rose. Rowan showed up at sunup. He didn't curse, didn't raise his voice. He simply rolled up his sleeves, pulled spare wire from his saddlebag, and got to work. May stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands, on her apron. "They wrecked the gate," she said. "We'll restring it," Rowan replied. "Stronger this time." She hesitated. "Why are you doing all this?" He looked up from the fence post. "Because no one else did." Her eyes glistened, but she blinked hard and didn't let the tears fall. "I made corn biscuits," she said quietly. "They're warm." "I'll take one when we're done," Rowan said. And he meant it. Hank swears he will have Rowan jailed by sunup. Sagebrush Fork woke to smoke on the horizon and news in every mouth. By breakfast, word had spread. Hank Collins had filed a complaint. Assault, property damage, incitement. Claimed Rowan Hale struck him near the livery after dark. Claimed witnesses, claimed bruises. Sheriff Pike found Rowan at the church, sweeping the porch steps before service. "I ain't proud of this," Pike muttered, hat in hand. "But I got to follow process." Rowan nodded once. "I'll walk." By the time they reached the jailhouse, a few heads had turned. Widow Alma saw from her window and frowned deep. Old Tom stood still on his porch, arms crossed, like the sky had cracked. Rowan stepped inside the cell, slow and quiet. The iron door clicked shut behind him. Not cruel, just tired. The room smelled like coal dust and disuse. One cot, one wool blanket, no real comfort. Outside, Hank strutted from saloon to mercantile, loud as a brass band. Viola clung to his arm, her expression pinched and thin. "He's gone now," Hank told a grocer's wife with too much volume. "Maybe that cowboy'll learn not to step above his station." At the ladies' circle meeting that afternoon, Viola dabbed her eyes and spoke soft. "May don't know how to be grateful. Rowan's poisoned her against family." Some nodded, some didn't. Inside the cell, Rowan folded his coat for a pillow. He hadn't raised a fist in years, and the last time he had, it was to stop a mule from kicking a child. He asked Pike for paper. "Got something to write," he said. An hour later, Widow Alma arrived with a wrapped bundle. "Fresh bread," she said. "Still warm." Rowan took it with gentle hands. "You're kind. You look tired." He nodded. "Can't afford to be." She handed him a pencil and pad. "Sheriff said you asked." "I need to file 2 things," Rowan said. "One's a notice of foreclosure, the other's a petition for protective occupancy based on unperfected title law." Alma blinked. "That's precise." "I've had time to study," Rowan replied. "If this all goes sideways, May needs offensive words stronger than wood." Alma looked down. "You really don't want anything back?" Rowan smiled once, faint but firm. "Mercy isn't a trade." That evening, May swept the broken glass from the porch again. The fence was halfway repaired. The bread she'd made was still rising slow and stubborn near the stove. She wrote out a sign in careful block letters. "No trespass. Property and claim." Then she tacked it to the post. Inside the jailhouse, Pike unlocked the door near midnight. "You didn't swing at him," the sheriff said. "No." "But you're still here." Rowan stood and stretched. "Sometimes being quiet is louder," Pike sighed. "Deputy Cole found the witnesses. Same fellas who busted the fence. They're gone now. Drunk and broke." Just like always, Rowan handed over 2 envelopes. "File these at the county clerk's. Make it official." Pike tucked them into his vest. "You sure about this?" "Sun's still coming," Rowan said. "Might as well meet it standing." Before dawn, Deputy Cole rode by Alma's to leave a 3rd envelope. This one smaller, hand-marked. Friday noon. Inside, it held the only 3 things that mattered now. A receipt from Keene and Company, an assignment ledger of all Hank's debts, and May's name at the top. Deputy Cole slides a church key and a message. Friday noon. Friday noon hit like the strike of a blacksmith's hammer. Loud, final, and ringing clear across Sagebrush Fork. Lanterns lined the road to the Collins homestead, a quiet signal from neighbor to neighbor. They came, not in protest or parade, but in witness. Alma Talbot brought her ledger. Deputy Cole stood straight in his Sunday vest. Old Tom carved a notch into his cane just to keep his hands steady. Even the Finch boys from the mercantile arrived, faces scrubbed and eyes wide. May swept the porch once more before noon. She wore her mother's apron, stitched back at the waist. Rowan Hale stood beside her, coat buttoned to the collar, a leather folder tucked beneath one arm. Hank came loud, a borrowed coat, half-fastened. Viola beside him again, powdered and pale. "You brought a crowd to a hanging, Hale?" Hank sneered. "No," Rowan said, calm as morning. "Just brought the bill." Sheriff Pike stepped forward, cleared his throat. "Rowan Hale has requested lawful witness under Civil Foreclosure Code 12B. I'll ask that everyone let the man speak." Rowan opened the folder with quiet precision. First item, master note from Keene and Company, redeemed at discount and now held in my name. Dated Monday. He held it. Up. Deputy Cole confirmed the seal and stamp. Second, assigned debts, feed, store, livery, all settled and reassigned to a single ledger, now consolidated, whispers stirred like wind through dry grass. Third, petition filed under unperfected title law. Original homestead patent under Ruth Collins. Transfer to Hank Collins never perfected. No release from the co-claimant Viola, recorded. Viola blinked hard. "You... what?" Rowan didn't flinch. "I said nothing before now out of respect. But the title chains broke. Property's vulnerable. Hank's face turned dark red. You got no right. Fourth, Rowan cut in, steady. Statement from May Collins, witnessed by Deputy Cole and Sheriff Pike, identifying abuse and injury to her person. The crowd shifted. Some looked away, others looked harder. I still live there, Hank roared. That land's mine. I've got rights. You do, Rowan said. You've got the right to challenge all this in court, but you'll lose, or you can walk away. Now Hank moved like a man about to swing, but the air shifted before he could. Sheriff Pike stepped forward, palm raised. No sudden moves, Hank. Viola's hand darted toward the folder, fast, panicked. May stepped between. No. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. You don't get to take what she built. Not this time, Viola froze. Then a horse panted up the lane, dust caked on saddle and boots. The county clerk dismounted and hurried forward with a sealed envelope in hand. Safe record, church file, he said, passing it to Deputy Cole. As requested. Cole broke the seal, read aloud. Filed by Ruth Collins, 1879, notarized directive. In event of abuse, absence, or provable neglect, full homestead possession shall transfer to May Collins, natural daughter and primary heir, dead quiet. Even the wind stopped. Rowan lowered his folder. That's the law, Hank. You've no more hold here. Hank lunged, but not at Rowan. At the ledger, like it might still erase something. Sheriff Pike blocked him with a hand to the chest. You're done. Hank deflated. Shoulders sagged. Eyes darted like a man looking for a back door that didn't exist. Deputy Cole stepped forward. By order of the county and the weight of evidence provided, Hank Collins, you're under arrest for false claim and property intimidation. Viola backed away, mouth a tight line, then turned and walked toward the road. No bags, no goodbyes. The townsfolk didn't cheer. They didn't need to. They just stayed still. And May, standing on her porch, did not cry. The clerk arrives dust-covered, clutching a sealed envelope. The air on the Collins porch held a strange stillness, like the moment after a thunderclap when the land listens for what's next. Sheriff Pike led Hank down the slope in cuffs, the dust kicking soft under each step. Viola didn't look back. She climbed into a borrowed wagon with 2 trunks and drove off like she'd never belonged there. No one cheered, no hats flew. It wasn't that kind of victory. May Collins leaned on the porch rail, her bandaged wrist limp but her chin steady. Her eyes watched the path where her father vanished, not with spite, not with triumph, but with the kind of quiet a woman learns when silence is safer than words. Rowan Hale stood near the fence, folder still in hand, boots braced, coat collar tugged against a cold that didn't come from the wind. Alma Talbot stepped forward first, hands clasped in front of her apron. You did right, both of you. We saw it clear. Old Tom grunted. Land's cleanest when the liars leave it. Rowan said nothing. He only turned toward May and held out the leather folder. You'll need this, he said. Ledger's in your name now. I signed over the title transfer just before noon. Full release, no lien, no strings. May stared at it, then up at him. You bought all that? To give it back? Rowan shrugged, but not like it was nothing. Bought it to stop a man who wouldn't stop himself. I don't need land to sleep sound. She didn't reach for the folder. Right away. She looked at his face, lined, wind-burned, the eyes of someone who had seen too much and still chosen kindness. What do I owe you? She asked. He smiled. Soft, warm, like coffee just before it cools. Not a penny. The crowd began to drift. A few murmured thanks, others nodded and returned to chores. That was the thing about justice in a place like Sagebrush Fork. It came quiet, and it left quiet. Later that afternoon, May swept the porch again, slower this time. She watched Rowan gather his saddlebag, readying to ride back toward Silver Spur. Rowan, he paused, reins in hand. I don't know how to start over. You already did, he said. She folded her arms, not defensive, just grounding herself. I've got a kitchen with broken shelves, a roof that leaks, and barely enough flour to last the week. He stepped closer, but didn't mount. Then you've got enough. That's how every honest story begins. She didn't cry, but her voice cracked a little. Bread and mercy, that's what I'd call it if I had the nerve to open my own table. For others, Rowan tipped his hat. You'll have more than nerve. You've got your name back that evening. As the sky bled gold and lavender over the edge of town, May set a bowl of dough to rise. She placed it near the stove where the warmth still lingered. Then she took her mother's old recipe, the edges scorched from when Hank burned it, and traced the missing words from memory, page by page. A fence post stood mended outside. The porch rail had a new nail. The stars came out early and didn't blink. May asks, "What do I owe you?" Rowan says, "Not a penny." Morning at the Collins homestead came softer now. The sun crept up slow over the slope behind the kitchen, touching the fence sills that Rowan had straightened with care and 2 lengths of borrowed wire. Wind stirred the scent of yeast and pine needles. In the window, a sign made from a scrap of lath and old blue ribbon read, "Bread and Mercy, open after sunrise." Inside, May brushed flour from her apron and checked the oven. The loaves rose clean and golden, split just right along the top. A new ledger sat on the table, one with her name on the cover. Its pages were neat, the columns square. It didn't track debts, just orders. Pie for Mrs. Talbot, 3 loaves for old Tom, a birthday cake for the Finch boy's mother. Her wrist still ached sometimes when the weather turned, but the splint was gone. She tied her apron one-handed with practiced ease, humming under her breath. Rowan Hale stepped up onto the porch carrying 2 sacks of flour and a tin of lard. He didn't knock anymore, he just nodded and set them down by the door. "You're early," May said. He gave her a small smile. "Didn't want Alma beating me to the apple buns." May laughed, a full sound, easy and warm. "You hauling goods for favors now?" "Nope, just hungry." They shared coffee at the porch rail while the town woke up below. Sheriff Pike passed on his morning ride, tipping his hat. The tin star was back on his vest, but it didn't gleam the same way it used to. Seemed quieter now, more like a promise than a badge. "Any word from Viola?" Rowan asked. May shook her head. "Gone quiet as snow. Good riddance," he sipped. "And Hank?" "Sentenced to 6 months and a fine he can't pay," she replied. "But that's the court's burden, not mine." They sat in companionable silence for a moment. Then May turned to him, serious. "You could have kept the land, Rowan. You had every right. Folks still don't get why you didn't." He didn't answer right away, just looked out across the slope, watching wind stir the cottonwoods. "A man can own a thing," he said slowly, "and still not be its keeper. Or he can keep it safe without ever pinning his name on it." May nodded. "You didn't save me. You just made it possible to save myself. That's the whole idea." Down by the gate, a child ran past with a lunch pail swinging. She waved at May, and May waved back, fingers dusted in flour. Later that week, bread breaks, and Mercy hosted its first gathering. Not a grand opening, just neighbors stopping by after church, bringing their own coffee cups and small talk. May served honey cornbread and peach preserves. Rowan fixed a hinge on the back door that had never sat right. No one brought up Hank, or Viola, or the fire-blackened pages that May had thrown away with the last of the ashes. Instead, they talked about spring rains, calf births, and how the Finch twins had started school. Alma promised to teach May how to sew new aprons from flour sacks. Old Tom left a carved spoon by the window with a note, to stir only good things. When the last plate was cleared and the coffee cooled, Rowan stayed to sweep the stoop. May watched him work for a moment. "You ever think of leaving Silver Spur?" she asked. He looked up. "Not until now." She didn't press, just handed him a warm biscuit wrapped in cloth and said, "Come by tomorrow." "I might try cinnamon." He took it with a nod. Wouldn't miss it. They stood on the porch a while longer, not needing to fill the quiet. In a town where mercy once felt scarce, it had taken root in a kitchen, and it held. If this kind of justice sits right with you, saddle up for the next ride, and subscribe for more Western stories that remind us what dignity, kindness, and second chances really mean.